Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. Today, I'm on with Derrick, who is my good friend and physician's assistant and meditation teacher. And we're going to be on here today talking about meditation and just the practice and some of its benefits and what it's done for us and whatever insight and experience Derrick wants to share with us. What brought me, well, hello, Derrick.
Hello. Great to see you,
So,
Alex. And quick correction, just because we just changed the name of it, I have to do my part for the profession. Physician associate.
physician
They voted to
associate.
change last year. Yeah.
Was it
And
assistant
Britain.
before?
It was physician assistant, and now it's physician associate.
Oh, so
Yeah.
I was close.
Yeah. People get
Um,
particular about it, so I like to throw it out there when I can.
yeah, you got to represent the profession. Um, so what made me think about this is because I just finished reading a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called
Mm.
Fair, and he was talking about in the book something that it made so much sense to me. And I guess I've been doing it for some time, but never really knew. But he was talking about how we have like these karmic seeds inside of us, like fear or unworthiness or
Mm.
grief or doubt or anything. And he was saying when they come up, normally people like we could hide from them or just like want the feeling to go away and kind of like ignore it. And then it goes down and it like stays there or it festers. And he was saying if you can sit and meditate and bring mindfulness to it, like encompass it in loving energy, take care of it. He uses that terminology, like take care of the feeling. Then every time it goes back down, it's uh it's gonna get a little smaller, like it's a little less because you brought a new energy of mindfulness to that
Mm.
energy. And that made a lot of sense to me. And I guess I have done that to an extent, probably a lot, but never really thought of it in that way. So that's what made me want, because I know you did. What is the training of meditation that you teach?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Thanks for sharing that already. And that really resonated with me, that description. So I'm glad we're going to get into that. I teach a standard mindfulness meditation. I was taught by the Dharmamoon and Tibet House Society. My meditation teacher was David Nichtern, and he's in the lineage of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche.
Mhm.
And it's a standard mindfulness meditation, was my 100-hour teacher training course. So a very simple practice of focusing on the breath, noting thoughts and other appearances as they arise, and returning to the breath, really providing a stability, a calm abiding, they might call it shamatha, of the mind. So I think a great place to start for anyone. And I think that's why I was drawn toward this exactly, because I like to connect people to meditation, to skills that help. And this to me was like really the ground that you have to start on before many other spiritual practice, or maybe any other, in my opinion.
Yeah, couple things that made me think of I agree. I think meditation is like you said, it's one of the it's something that's always indispensable in spiritual practice, but it is like such a necessity to like to have a foundation to like start being mindful, to start growing, to start changing.
Mhm.
And for any practice you're gonna move into, it's like meditation's so important because it starts to give you like more control of the mind, more awareness of the thought process, like
Mhm.
not so much, and we were talking about before this recording about the magic, the ceremonial magic, but Damien Eccles, who does that, he even says meditation is indispensable because when you're
Mhm.
doing the ceremonies, uh, you can direct your energy so much better and throughout your daily life instead of your energy just spilling out and like different thoughts and different patterns and kind of getting you all exhausted. The more you
Mhm.
meditate, it's like more focused and like more centered and you can serve and direct it more. Does that seem to resonate?
It really does, and I'm glad you gave that lens, because that really resonates with me. And it's interesting, as a healthcare provider, I kind of came from mindfulness. Actually, before I was in healthcare, I found mindfulness, thankfully, in meditation. But I think I've always been in a more rationalistic mindset, more healing oriented. And so mindfulness for me, at first I didn't really have any vocabulary around energy systems, energy dispersal, magic, anything. For me, it helped me just get a separation from thoughts. And I think that might be
Mhm.
where many people um, begin, because we're so often just stuck in this nonstop transcript, these thoughts going through our head and identifying with them and feeling like we're talking with ourselves. I heard someone, I think Sam Harris says it beautifully. If you actually just vocalized all the thoughts that go through your head, you'd sound like you were schizophrenic. You'd be like you were someone just walking around on the street, just talking to themselves. That's
You
actually what we're
would.
doing all day long. We just don't vocalize them. How do we, therefore, then get some separation from those thoughts, not identify with them, and let, like you're saying, our energy flow where we want them to? Sometimes in the thoughts, and sometimes in your body, sometimes in the work of art you're creating, sometimes in loving another, in healing. Where do you want your energy to go? For me, the first step was finding out that I am not my thoughts. And that only happened through hours and hours of meditation, through sitting, noticing, and returning to whatever is really there, my breath, my body sensations.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, we would sound insane if we were just
It's pretty
all of
funny.
everybody's thoughts was just going on all the time. Because I just realized that before I went to bed last night, because everything you say is just it's just a vocalized thought. It's like you have all these thoughts, and some of them you say them as the thought form comes out. And you said you spent like many hours in meditation. How does that like look for you? I know you like always have a lot of really good things to say about David Nichtstern and the practice. So you must have found it really beneficial.
Yeah, I had a weird path through my meditative journey. I think I began after just again, coming from a very rationalistic, even atheistic, before I was spiritual kind of perspective. I would listen to a 10% Happier podcast with Dan Harris, where they just presented a research study about how when you pay attention to what you do, you find yourself to be more happy, 10% happier, maybe, more content than if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, no matter what it is. Even if you hate the thing you do it, you're scrubbing toilets, you're arguing with your partner or friend. If you're present while you do it, this study, this kind of a sociologic study, found people to be more content. So that opened the door to just some real basic meditation practices. I thankfully found Sam Harris, who taught a nice mixture and teaches. He has a wonderful app, Waking Up, which I still use even to this day, where he teaches a mixture of basic mindfulness meditation, being aware of your body, your thoughts, your breath, and Dzogchen practice, a
Mm.
more Eastern, not as well understood in the West practice of non-self, of pointing out that there's no self. Similar to what we're saying with the conversation and how we're always talking to ourselves. Well, if you really keep looking and say, okay, who just thought that? Turn attention back on itself, you might find, and you'll have to experiment for yourself, you might find there's nothing there. And I believe, isn't this called Becoming Nobody with
Yeah.
Alex? I thought so. So, I think that's what they're pointing at. So I found that really interesting. I became a very serious practitioner just from what I experienced in my first experience with a guided meditation on his podcast before Sam Harris even had an app. Just that very simple thing was changing my consciousness in ways that I could tell. And I became a daily practitioner for about maybe 5 years before I did deeper practice, maybe
Whoa.
3 or 4. And it was the only thing I would do every single day. I worked out regularly, I had other practices, but nothing. So, I say that because I try to notice what I do more than what I say or think. I feel like that seems to be a more resonant and true expression of who I am. Almost like you were saying with speech. Why is it that we say some of our thoughts and many stay inside? I like to think, if we're coming from an authentic place, that our heart, or somewhere lower, maybe diaphragm too. If we're coming from that authentic space, what we say is a surprise even to me. I don't know why I'm picking the words I'm picking right now.
Yeah.
That's this magical, like, just mysterious phenomenon that happens when you start to develop a meditation practice. So I was doing that daily, and then I wanted to go deeper,
Yes.
and I did a Vipassana retreat. So that was in the lineage of Essen Goenka, this wonderful organization. I highly recommend them. Free, no cost meditation retreats at centers across the country, donation based. They only let you donate after the fact. They won't let you donate before. So you have no obligation. They really, only it's brought on by the generosity of students who keep getting something from it and wanting to pass that on, to pay it forward. I love that about the organization. So I sat a 10-day totally silent meditation retreat, 11 hours a day of sitting, constantly mindful. You had one maybe 10-minute session with the instructor if you needed it each day, where you could talk. Otherwise, you were just with yourself. No reading, no writing, no phones, of course, just meditating and doing a body scan meditation, a different type. So my meditation, I've really explored multiple kinds to try to find what resonates. And that practice was very powerful for me, that experience to really solidify, okay, this is what's here. This is what the nature of reality is. Not that I know that, but I started to get a feel for it because I took away the distractions and I really concentrated for 10 days. And then from there, I went back to a hodgepodge of practices until I found this teacher training course and became certified in mindfulness meditation. Again, I think it can incorporate any other practice, but just go into the breath, noting thoughts, going back to the breath. So simple, so grounding, and it's helped me launch deeper into any other practice, like a Vipassana body scan or a ceremonial magic ceremony or whatever, with so much more stability and clarity.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. That's wonderful. Yeah, I think um the practice is like, it's interesting because people start to meditate at first, like, to like feel a little happier or like a
Mm-hmm.
little calmer or like whatever,
Please.
that's usually, I actually just had a conversation with a friend this morning that in California who he heard about meditation so much and he was like, I did it once in a while for like 10 minutes, but I didn't see what the big thing about it was. He's like, I think it was just something people do to be a little calmer and a little more productive, which can be a good start. And then sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
starts to take you deeper and deeper. And then he had an experience where he had insomnia for like a week after a procedure or something, and he could not like sleep. And he said it was like really bad to where he almost like was gonna go into the hospital. Like it was like really bad. He thought he was going crazy. And I
Wow.
guess one night he laid in the bed and he didn't sleep, but he like meditated the whole night. And
Mm.
it took him because his like ego defenses were so far down because he was so like going crazy and
Yeah.
exhausted. He went into like a space behind his thoughts that he had never been in before. And it like was like totally blissful. And now that once he came out of it, he like looked at everything differently because it took him out of his paradigm in a way that he like, this was like the structure he was in. Then he's seen it from out here and realized like this is what he really is. And it just like totally transformed now how he sees um the practice and the mindfulness and everything like that. Um
Wow.
which I thought was really cool. But no, I wanted to touch on a few things. You said you were talking about like speaking from your heart and stuff, and it's interesting because you'd think that like, especially the Buddhist practices, they seem very like in like wisdom centered, like mind centered. And sometimes I don't know if people realize that when you work on that, since all it goes with the heart and with compassion too. And I think sometimes people think like, the Buddhism, for example, is like a wisdom path. But if you look at the Buddha,
Mm.
obviously he was a being of extremely vast compassion. I mean, he got enlightened and chose to stay here just to help people. So do you think like um
Mm.
the mindfulness practices obviously open up your heart too as well, right?
I think so. Subek, all one. And I love that you bring up the mind heart. Ram Dass says, quiet the mind, open the heart. How do you quiet the mind? You meditate. How do you open the heart? You love whatever you can love, and
Yes.
keep going. I forget how that ends, but you love whatever you can love. Um, and I do think they're related. I think all things are related. That's one of the maybe insights that come from meditation. And that's, Vipassana especially, but I think all meditation is a
Mhm.
insight practice. It's one of the benefits we get. In mindfulness meditation, when I teach, I talk about strength, stability, and clarity. And the strength and stability, you can kind of understand that strength of mind, of will, stability of your mind, not being, pushed around in so many directions, dispersing the energy that you're trying to build and use. But the clarity part's really interesting to me. That's where maybe people like your friend who at first were like, maybe it just helps you be a little calmer. I think the clarity part is missing from a lot of the West right now. It's insight into the true nature of our consciousness, at least. Maybe that's all we can speak on. I don't know if
Yeah.
we can really speak outside of that. And so when what you said about the head of heart made me think about, again, how I got here, where I'm at, always trying to balance the scientific rationalism and open curiosity and self-experimentation and the experiences of others and the experience of wisdom traditions. It's a weird path to walk. So when you say that, I thought of the chakra system, something I used to put no bearing on or weight in, but now I've had experiences of energy, and it's a helpful system to take on. I'll at the same time look at anatomy books to try to figure out what nerve plexuses are around there and what could be going on, or our spinal column and how that works. And I think they're all one. They're all compatible together if we're open enough to not know one thing and at the expense of not knowing so many other things and shutting them out. And so I absolutely think that as we work with our mind and quiet the mind, we naturally begin to open the heart. We naturally get out of our
Yeah.
small story, our self centered story. I've been thinking a lot about self centered. It doesn't mean that you're a jerk or anything necessarily. It just means you're centered around yourself, one little ball of you in the entire world. And as we talked about before, becoming nobody, that self isn't even there. And as you realize that some more, as you practice that, as you stabilize the realization of non-self, I think naturally your heart opens because there's no self to be closed for.
Mm.
You are just connected to everything, and that's a natural flow of energy. I don't need to get there spiritually. I don't need to take on a belief for that. That just happened if I meditate. So absolutely connected.
Yeah, because if you get clarity, then the clarity would definitely lead to seeing the world
Mm,
differently through compassionate eyes. Do you think so? I think what I've found in my life is that conveying that non-self, that non-ultimate, that there's ultimately not an existence of a separate self, and that we're boundless by nature, and as you say, Subek, all one. It's very hard to convey, I think, for me, to people. Like,
mhm,
I think it's very hard for a person to grasp even what that even possibly means, because most of us live completely encapsulated in our paradigm, in our ego. So it's like it gets interpreted from within the ego. So unless you've
exactly.
had those experiences or that insight to see outside, it's hard, I think, to even comprehend that. And that's why it's interesting, because I go to a Zen meditation group. I haven't been there in a while, and they always say like the practice, like sitting and meditating, is indispensable. That's what we want you to do. The religion is optional or whatever.
Mm, I like that.
But which is, and I see, yeah. But it's interesting though, because I think there is great value in study to at least a certain degree,
Mhm,
because then when you're sitting and meditating, if you have like the background of like
mm,
the philosophy and the understanding behind like the non-self or the unity, I think it changes the quality of it a little bit, because you kind of know, like, for me, I did a lot of study before I got into like heavily practicing these techniques. And so once I did though, I understood kind of like what I was doing. Like when the patterns would arise, when like um I would get behind the thoughts, I'd be like, oh, this is what they're talking about when they say this. This is what
Mhm.
they meant. Where otherwise, I think if I didn't know that, I might have just seen it as some phenomenon and not really been able to grasp as much as what was going on with it.
Absolutely. The image that was coming to mind there is very helpful. Was an experience I have again and again meditating, where you are building up the ego almost in a way, building up some sense of rational structure, a thought, something to give you the strength, the bravery to step into the unknown, to step into uncertainty
Mm,
and grow and change. So it's almost like building a staircase and then being willing to feel confident enough in that staircase, in your stability there, to take the leap into nothingness and find that you're then on an elevator taking you higher. That
yeah.
it's okay that you don't go down, or maybe you're on an escalator. I think that's what I heard. The study really complements the practice, but you can't have one or the other. If you're just building staircases all the time, you can try to build your stairway to heaven, but that's a lot of stairs. There's a actual fundamental change, something just like you couldn't build a stairway to heaven, but you could build a rocket ship if you'd like on this earth. So as you practice and you get some stability and you learn, you study, you get the structures to let go into this thing, this mystery of life, this. And that's always my number one advice for someone starting meditation or looking deep in their practice. Be curious. It's my advice to myself, coming from some very rationalist. My staircases can really be sticky. My structures, my thoughts, the things I know, and I have to keep awakening that curiosity and remembering how little I know about this world around me, how little I know about the nature of consciousness. And as soon as I'm open to that and take that little leap, I find that I'm held or lifted
Mm.
up by something far more stable. And then there's more study, more practice, and you can go up and up and up.
Yeah, I can see there's so many different like planes of consciousness like as we grow and as our awareness expands, and then it's like you just hit a new level and then you see and understand and love in ways you never have before. And then it goes to another level and you're like, "Whoa," and it's like raising those pools of those bars of consciousness. Do you think that like I was reading these articles not too long ago and this guy was talking about like how he was doing heavy spiritual practice for like 15 years, like secluded. And then he realized that like he wasn't fully getting there because he had all this unresolved trauma and stuff that he had been like not dealing with. And it made me
Mm,
think of that when you said like the stairway and stuff and like the solidifying like the ego structure. Like um, do you think that it's important to like before going deeper into some maybe sorts of practices with meditation or what else? I feel like it's important to get like yourself semi straight at least on like your
mm,
psychological level, like your trauma, like that instead of trying to like bypass that
mm.
and go like above it and then have to like crash back down because you didn't deal with like the basic things, right? I don't know.
Yeah, no, great. I don't know if that was a question, but great thing to bring up. A fantastic thing to bring up, because something I think anyone on a spiritual path will have to confront, and I've definitely had to confront. I often think of Ram Dass's story about talking to Maharaji about all the issues with his family and how he wants to meditate through them, and Maharaji saying, "Go back home, fix the things with your
Yeah.
family. That's
Yeah.
where you need to be." So, but I don't think it's so simple. Um, what you brought up at the beginning really caught my attention from Thich Nhat Hanh. That healing quality of attention, of love, really resonates with me. And especially being in the healthcare field, I've been more and more thinking about what is healing? What does that mean? What does it feel like? How do we do it? What does that mean? And I loved what you talked about, almost taking the parts of yourself that you aren't okay with, that you're afraid of, that are stuck somewhere perhaps, surrounding them with awareness, with love. And then the image that comes to mind is almost a melting of them, or an integration back into the whole,
Whoa.
an integration into the rest of your mind. And parts of us get stuck, especially from early childhood experiences, from my understanding of trauma. That's where a lot of it develops, those first 3 to 6 years of life or so. Is where so much comes in, really early childhood stuff that you might not even remember. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind when you're doing any practice. Who knows what barriers are in your way that you don't even see? What roadblocks are on you on your construction site as you try to build your staircase that are invisible to you, that are deep down and may take something outside of you to heal, or a sufficient amount of attention and concentration that's
Yes.
really hard to get to. So that's one reason why many people say that meditation practice doesn't really start until you do an intensive retreat, like the Vipassana retreat. It is one of the things that led me to do that, because what I experienced there was that healing, as far as I can tell. And it was very interesting how it happened. It was on the 7th day of the retreat, where I was doing my body scan, like I had been dutifully. I've been aware of my breath to start, just the sensation right at the tip of your nose, just a little tickle at your nose for the first 3 days or so. Then you move to a body scan pattern, and you're doing that all day, sitting, meditating, scanning, feeling the sensations in your body. And if you've read much on trauma, you might have heard, that the body keeps the score, that trauma lives in the body. We store so much, and I'm sure in your kundalini yoga, you know a lot more about this process than I do. And it's fascinating how bodily these things are. So I'll often be too mental, too up in my head, and really kind of ignore
Yeah.
almost that my body is part of this whole process, and I need to bring love and awareness to it, maybe through yogic practices, exercise, dance, and meditation and body scanning. So I think it's a good metaphor for what we're doing with our mind. And maybe it's the same thing: mind, body, spirit, all
Yeah.
interconnected, interwoven in this complicated way that I can't understand, but I can work with, I can try, I can be curious about. And so as I'm body scanning on the 7th day of this retreat, and there's been this terrible, 9 out of 10 hip pain. I've been sitting for 11 hours a day for a week now, and it hurts so bad. And I'm just sitting, and we're doing one of our 3-hour sits of Aditana meditation
Whoa.
of strong determination, where you're not supposed to move an inch for the whole hour of sitting that we're doing that day. And then you'll take a break where you can fidget, and then later that day you do another Aditana, no movement. So I'm in 9 out of 10 pain and trying not to adjust. It's screaming at me. And what do? Very similarly to what you talked about with Thich Nhat Hanh, with the parts of ourselves we don't love, that are hurt, that are stuck. I just brought love. I brought awareness to that part of my body. I just was able to flow in it and not resist and surrender over to sensation. The pain went away like that. When I finally there was a free flow of energy throughout my whole body. The body scan became so easy. There was no pain. And I was merged into what I can only call universal love, this expanded state of consciousness. It was pink, for what that's worth. There was a pink color to it. And it was euphoric. I was the happiest I've ever been. I wanted to cry for joy, but there was some part of me that still didn't want to disturb the meditators around me. It was kind of like being a little quiet as I'm like overcome with joy and euphoria and love. I go up to my meditation instructor right after. We're allowed to ask questions at one time a day. I'm like, what the heck just happened? And his explanation was that I released a sankhara, or you'll hear, I think, samskara. It might be a different version of that word. A deep trauma, basically, a fold, a something in your mind, a corrugation, a rigidity in the mind that I think the best word for it in my Western vocabulary is trauma. And by bringing awareness, which to me is love, is the same thing, awareness, by turning toward instead of turning away, almost like a Chinese finger trap. You pull, it won't go. The pain's going to stay. The pain's going to stay. But if you go inward, if you turn toward it, you surrender to it, you're free. And that's what he says happened. I didn't know which sankhara, what childhood trauma or event was released there, but that happened. That was a long time. That took 7 days of intense retreat and doesn't happen for everyone.
just to
It's not the
get there.
goal
Yeah.
to get one of these traumas, sankaras, out. So, that's why I'm glad you brought up this. What work do we need to do? There are lots of different ways. I can work through that trauma in therapy or through yoga or with psychedelic plant medicine. I think that's really helpful for many. That is one thing that helped me build the faith that there is actually a there to meditation, that healing happens, that insight happens, was through psychedelic experience, intense, quick, you're back down, you're left with a lot to integrate. And then that's opened up the West in many ways to meditation, I think, is those experiences of not knowing, of uncertainty, of healing, of love. And then I found the meditative path, a sustainable, safe, practice for thousands of years path, and found the same thing, if not more so. My Vipassana experience was much more intense than any psychedelic trip I've ever had, strictly through meditation, awareness, and acceptance. So many paths, I think, is what I'd say for you. You can't bypass just with meditation some things, and I think if you really listen, you'll find where you need to go. Maybe I need to exercise more. Maybe I need to talk to my family and go back to them before I go study meditation. Maybe I need to talk to a therapist because there's some stuff in my mind that's holding me back. I think many paths all leading to the same thing.
Yeah, you have to honor where you're at. That's beautiful. I can't believe that
Mm,
experience that you had with that. And it shows
mm,
so many things. Like, first, it shows just the reality of like trauma or the karma that we
mm,
store. When I was at the 7 day Zen retreat I went to,
mm,
I had an experience where I just started crying in the middle of the
mm.
meditation about nothing. It just happened. And the
Mm.
teacher said the same thing. It's just old karma purifying itself. He's like, don't
Wow.
worry about
Mm,
it. He's like, because you don't even have to know exactly what it is, what it's stemming from. But I like how you said that with it. That was wonderful. But in the body, because that guy I was just telling you, I read the article on, he works especially with trauma, and he says like that the trauma comes because you're not able to stay present with something that happens. And he used an
mhm,
example of
mhm,
he like went off a big skateboard thing to try and impress these like kids that he thought was cool when he was a kid, and he like fell on his butt and got hurt all bad.
mm.
Instead of crying and processing it, he like pulled all his muscles in and acted all tough and like walked away because he didn't want to cry in front of the cool kids. And
Wow.
he said like he stored that curvature in the bottom of his spine and his hip for like the next 30 years because he didn't let the nervous system like do what it was supposed to
Mm.
do, and then that became trauma.
That really resonates with some of my tightness in
Uh,
my body still that I'm working through. That's thanks for sharing that. That's fascinating. Huh. Did
yeah.
you have any experiences like that on your tree other than the crying? Was there any bodily shifts you noticed or a bodily thing that forever changed for you from that?
I didn't. I think I'm going back this year in a couple weeks, and
Mm,
I got to be more aware.
mm,
Nothing comes to mind. I know I didn't have much pain because leading up to it, I was doing a bunch of
mm,
yoga and acupuncture and massage and like deadlifting for my back. So I know my body was like, as far as the physical pain of sitting, I did pretty well compared to most.
mm,
But I don't remember. I do know, like you said, the Kundalini yoga does work a lot with the trauma and tension that's stored in our body.
mm,
Um, but I'll have to be more aware this year. Yeah, that was wonderful, everything that you said there. I wanted to kind of before we wrap up, the last thing I wanted to ask you about, which we've kind of already alluded to, is practice, like
mm,
discipline and consistent practice. And I think it's so important because like in the modern age, it's easy for us to say like in new age spirituality, like you're already God or you're perfect and this and that,
yeah.
which we are. But if somebody's suffering greatly inside and then they're told, well, it's okay, you're just perfect how you are, that's cool, but they're still going to be suffering a lot inside. And I think it's like we are, but we also aren't. And that's like where that veil is. So I think practice is so important, like a disciplined and consistent practice, at least to the best of someone's ability, to keep like wearing away at that and like chipping away. And like you said, whether it's
Absolutely.
a therapeutic practice or a psychedelic practice or a meditation practice or all of them, but like, do you think there's a high value in like having consistency to doing some type of practice?
Mm, great question, and absolutely. And I love that you highlighted all the different routes. I think I used to really, I could be narrow-minded. I could be, um, whenever something worked well for me, I felt like I needed to proselytize to the world. Oh,
Yeah.
meditation's been incredibly beneficial. This is the path. This is the way. I do feel that strongly, for a lot of people and for myself still, but I'm open to this mysterious world and all that I don't know. And that could be the worst thing for someone at one point in their life, and they need to be doing something very different. I'm more open to this mystery than I used to. But I say that because whenever I would find a thing, it would be my thing that I would evangelize and say, you need to do this, you need to practice, and you'll see. And again, that's where I think multimodality therapy, or practice is so useful, where you can really not get pigeonholed into one practice and stay open to other things and notice how they're all interrelated. So that's one thing I want to say, is the practicing of many different things and openness to many different practices, not becoming too wedded to one thing, too much of a disciple through your discipline of one thing can be, it's a pitfall that I had. So I try to share, being open. That being said, meditation been one of the most valuable ones for me. And like I said, I practiced every day for so long. Nothing else that I did, in my life was like that consistent on, as I was working through school, then a career, all these things. Nothing
Yeah.
else spoke to me as much. So I think one thing that came to mind was discipline equals freedom. Discipline equals freedom. And Jocko Willink says that, and it always resonates with me. And I think that's what we need whenever we are taking on a path, whenever we do start to see maybe some benefit, we have an experience like a psychedelic or spiritual experience that shows us something outside of ourselves. I think that's what your friend experienced with the sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
That's a very psychedelic mind state to be in. 7 days without sleep, you're outside of your normal state of thinking, maybe a little bit crazy, just like psychedelics might make us a little crazy. That helps us get out of our narrow
The
thinking.
Yeah, out of the normal like paradigm. I love that
Yeah.
discipline equals freedom because that's the hard thing for me to convey. It's like because when I was all addicted to drugs and stuff, I thought that was freedom. I was like, "Whoa, I'm free. I
Yeah.
like do whatever I want." But I was like so bound and like I was so like fearful and separate and like that. Um, and it's hard to convey I maybe to someone, but what I've realized is like the more discipline I have in my life and my practices and like the more I see that non-self, that becoming nobody, it's like I live within structures that seem disciplined, maybe rigid and scheduled, but I've actually become more free inside, where it's like I'm moving through these structures, but I experience a great degree of freedom. Where before I thought I had no outer
Mm,
structures and did whatever I wanted, but I was like very bound inside. So I think that's cool to realize that
yeah.
like the discipline, you can be free within the discipline within the boundaries.
Almost a shifting of scales. As you're more free inside, you may, of course, get more structured outside. As you get more
Yes.
structured outside, you may be more free inside. And it seems paradoxical, but it also makes a certain karmic sense, a balancing
Yeah.
sense. And I love that you brought that up. And I think the reason I brought those examples up was, where do we get the faith to have discipline? How come I kept going back to the cushion and meditating, every single day whenever I found this practice? Where did that faith come from? I think sometimes it's from something outside of myself, some experience. I can't put words to it because faith is often irrational. That's been really hard for me. I really have difficulty with the words belief or faith. I don't know what they mean yet still, and that's part of my path to figure out, what those mean. But I think it's very related. Having faith in something allows you to have the discipline to go further. I have faith And it's based in reason, it's based in experience, it's based in spiritual experience, it's based in a feeling in my gut or my core. All these different things. It's not just the brain study, the fMRI data about brain changes. That's not enough for me. It's not just the irrational psychedelic experiences I've had. It's some culmination of all of that has led to a faith. And I think that's where we have to be open to really listen to what's calling us, what our truth is. I guess I hate to use language. It can seem kind of wooey sometimes, but that really is. It's finding our truth, finding what's true to you, what calls you, what resonates to you. And for me, that's where I get the discipline. And from there, absolutely, the discipline is the only time where I make progress, where I heal, is when I have disciplined practice. And that even at this point in my life, that goes in and out. Sometimes I lose the faith. I'm having a harder time getting to the mat. And that's often where I'll use community, which one thing I want to say for anyone who's doing anything, I guess. I was going to say looking for meditation practice, spiritual practice, but anything. I was just meditating with my partner, Courtney, before this. We've been linking up and meditating almost daily. It's so nice to have someone else there to do it, to have a group, to not have to do it on your own. So I found the discipline on my own. I meditated alone for years. Now I want to be able to share that. I became a teacher. And now I'm more naturally finding with my family, with my community, wanting to share this. And it takes a little less discipline. So that's one thing I'll say. It's worth it to do the hard work. Nothing comes for free. We don't get healing, grace, salvation without doing something, some work, some discipline. But then it does get easier. It does get easier. That's the one thing I want to spread. I don't think a lot of people have, especially in the West, have such an austere, stern, almost a self-hatred in some ways. It's really permeated our culture. You're a not good enoughness. And so saying you need to be disciplined can lead to people really, self-flagellating, really beating themselves up. I should be meditating more. I should be. But how about I want to meditate more? I have faith that it's going to help me. I want to. I want to do this more. And the discipline starts to become a little more easy.
Yeah, I think as the faith increases and the understanding and the results, then it definitely it like increases your zeal for the practice. And yeah, I like what you said, and I guess we could probably finish here. I think that that's super important, is not to like the discipline doesn't have to seem like a discipline. You can be free within it, and it does not have to be like the worst thing someone could do is like bash themselves and criticize themselves for not practicing enough or properly or whatever. Because that's just like negative energy. That's just like keeping the storyline
Mm-hmm.
going, and that's just gonna like hold you back. So I always just like honor where I'm at, like Ram Dass would say, and then proceed. Like if I
Okay.
don't do something, I just think, oh, that'd have been cool. Next time I'll do that and proceed. I don't
Mm-hmm.
sit
And then
there being
proceed.
like,
I like that.
you're bad or this, because I can't even start to go down that road because like I know where that could lead, and I don't want to put energy into hurting myself like that. I don't want to
Yeah,
put any.
well said. No, well said. That was really beautifully put.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's just like honoring like even in the Bhagavad Gita, he says it's better to do your
Mm,
path imperfectly, Krishna says, than to do another's perfectly. And like
mm,
Ram Dass always says, you just have to all we can do is honor where we're at. And if we pretend to be somewhere we're not, we'll have to go back anyway and like end up fixing it up. So like there shouldn't be any like good or bad or judgment, just like honoring where we're at and proceeding. Did you have anything else you wanted to share with us before we closed?
I just echo what you said. I really love that. And I think what came to mind was some song, even if your life is out of tune, it's better to sing along with it. Even if your life is out of tune, it's better to sing along with it.
Along
I
with
think
that.
it echoes what you're saying so beautifully. Yeah, and no, and just thank you. I think it's always a pleasure to talk with you and to connect. Like I said, community. I find so much strength
Oh
in
yeah,
everything
community,
with
satsang.
community. So I really appreciate you
Yes.
doing this and everything you do and everything you put out there. It's really helped me, helped a lot of people. Our Kundalini yoga classes have really been
Yeah.
fantastic for me. You're a fantastic teacher. So thanks so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I know I'm gonna try and get a weekly class going, like on Monday nights on Zoom for people
Mm.
everywhere, um, within the next couple months. But yeah, thank you so much. That was wonderful. That was beautiful. Everything you shared with us, I appreciate
Mm.
it.